I'm joined now by the former National Security Advisor and United States Ambassador to the UN, Ambassador John Bolton. Sir, it's been a couple of days now since the debate. We've had some time to settle it all in. We've got about 8 weeks to go until you guys head to the polls to choose the next president. What are your biggest concerns at the moment?
Well, I think internationally, the world is in a very dangerous place. And as the debate on Tuesday showed, there wasn't a lot of discussion about the challenges that the U.S. faces in the Middle East, in Ukraine, in East Asia with China, and not much attention to it and not much specifics from either of the two candidates. So it's a very, very dangerous world out there. And so far in this very important election, we just haven't heard enough from the candidates, I think, for the people to make a really informed decision.
It is indeed a dangerous world. I was speaking to Leon Panetta just a few days ago, who I know is a sort of colleague, peer of yours, and we were talking about the state of things, re China, Russia, Iran, obviously what he sees as threats to the United States and safety and security. If Trump were to re-enter the White House, how would you think relationships with those types of powers would play out over the coming years?
Well, I think with respect to Russia and Ukraine, this would be a very favorable development for Vladimir Putin. Trump was given a chance in the debate to say expressly he favored Ukraine winning the war, this war against Russia's unprovoked aggression, and he wouldn't say it. And I think that tells you all you need to know about which way he would tilt, and it would be very bad for Ukraine. In the Middle East, people think he has more of a record based on his first term, but I can assure you his Trump's anecdotal, ad hoc, transactional approach to everything, including national security affairs, means there's no guarantee that he would behave in the second term as he did in the first, and in an already very dangerous situation with Iran's nuclear weapons program, its obvious use of terrorist proxies throughout the region. That we need stability and clear U.S. leadership, not the Trump approach. And in Asia, although he's been critical of China for a number of things, I think if Xi Jinping called him up after the election, if in fact Trump won, and said, Donald, I'm so glad you've been reelected. You know, we've had problems with the U.S. since you departed the White House. Let's get together. We can solve them all again, that Trump would jump at the opportunity. So I think his policies ultimately would be very risky for the U.S. If he were elected.
You know, I was speaking to Sebastian Gorka, who is a strategist to the Trump campaign. You're probably aware of him, in an interview yesterday, and he was talking about the fact that when Trump was in office, there wasn't what's currently happening in Gaza, the conflict there wasn't the war in Ukraine. And he said, you know, put two and two together. Why do you think that is? Kind of baking that sort of correlation causation argument. What do you say to that? Was Trump the arbiter of peace for the world?
No, look, that's Trump's standard line, and he said the war in Ukraine wouldn't have happened if he'd been reelected. The current war in the Middle East wouldn't have happened, and on and on. Who knows? It's a statement that's neither provable nor disprovable. And you know, I think what the Russians were waiting for in the last year and a half of the Trump administration, after the famous phone call with Zelensky, was they were waiting through the COVID pandemic and waiting to see what a second Trump term would look like. But we could have easily seen a reprise of what has already happened. And I think the same applies in many other circumstances. Trump simply says, what Biden did, I would have done the opposite. And that's hardly a policy, and it hardly recognizes there are actually a few things that happen in the world that are not dependent on the United States.
Extraordinary to imagine, yeah. I mean, but of course, economic, military superpower, what happens in the US has ramifications elsewhere. Look, you've touched on Russia a fair bit already. Talk to me about what's visibly happening in terms of the way that Russia's interacting with this new election, the invisible stuff aside, but the supposed endorsement that Putin gave to Harris. What did you make of that?
Well, I think that's classic, I would say, communist desinformatia in the Russian word. It's disinformation. It allows Trump to say Putin has endorsed my opponent, even though it's pretty clear to me that Putin would love to see Trump reelected. He thinks he's an easy mark. He thinks he can get what he wants from Trump. But he's smart enough, obviously, not to say that in open channels. And he would like to see Trump. That's what they're trying to do with their covert operations. There are a lot of countries, Iran, North Korea, China as well, trying to influence the U.S. election through covert means. It's a very serious threat to our democracy, and I think other democracies around the world. And hopefully we're combating them in cyberspace. But I think people in the U.S. and really more broadly need to understand that the totalitarian governments of the world are trying to fight an asymmetric war against countries that they want to subvert.
But look, Trump bigs himself up about his relationship with North Korea, with being able to deal with people like Vladimir Putin. Is there anything to that in terms of getting those sort of what are sometimes called strongmen in a room with someone like Trump?
Well, you know, Trump says openly that he thinks his personal relations with the head of state, particularly of American adversaries, are an exact description of the state-to-state relationships between the United States and that other country, North Korea or whatever. That's completely wrong. There's certainly a role for personal relations in international affairs, but these hard men, Putin, Xi, Kim, they know what their national interests are, and that's what they pursue. They're not pursuing personal relations. I've been in rooms with Trump and all three of them at different times, and know them otherwise. Look, I think they believe Trump is a laughing fool, and they will take advantage of him accordingly. And that's dangerous for the United States, obviously.
Former U.S. National Security Advisor John Bolton, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks for having me.